Hi, my name is Ben Scirica. I'm a cardiologist and senior investigator at the TIMI study group, and we're going to talk about the CORALreef Outcomes study.
And my name is David Berg. I'm also a cardiologist at Brigham and Women's Hospital and an investigator in the TIMI study group. So, Ben, maybe to kick things off, it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the design of the CORALreef Outcomes trial.
So this is a large multi-center study that has enrolled almost 15,000 patients across the world. We've included patients who are at high risk of cardiovascular events. That means people who have had heart attacks, strokes, and have peripheral arterial disease, or are at high risk of having their first heart attack or stroke. This is being done across dozens of countries and hundreds of sites, and it's a phase 3 randomized clinical trial of the drug enlicitide compared to placebo. And we're looking at a variety of clinical outcomes. And our primary endpoint includes the outcomes such as coronary heart death, myocardial infarction, strokes, revascularizations, and acute limb ischemic events.
I think it's a exciting trial with an exciting compound, and I think we can talk a little bit more about the nature of the compound. But I think one of the things that excites me about the trial is that it's a really diverse population, and I mean that in every sense of the word. It's both a secondary prevention in patients who've already had an event, but also that high risk primary prevention type of patient that we see in clinic often. And so I think all potential groups of patients who stand to benefit from this therapy.
Yeah, we know that atherosclerosis, atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is a continuum, and we want to be able to test the efficacy of this drug in the continuum. And so let me ask you, David, a little bit about the target of this drug, PCSK9, and how it works and why it's important.
Yeah. So PCSK9, I think, has been an important story in cardiovascular medicine really over the last decade plus. And so to take a step back, we know that LDL cholesterol is a key driver of cardiovascular risk. And we also know from decades of clinical trials of therapies that lower LDL cholesterol, that lowering LDL cholesterol does in fact reduce the risk of atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease events like stroke and MI and some of the outcomes that you were just mentioning. And so PCSK9 is a target that is very well validated, and their interest initially came from genetic studies, which demonstrated or really implicated its role in regulating LDL cholesterol levels in the circulation and subsequent cardiovascular risk. And so what we know about PCSK9 is that circulating PCSK9 molecules bind to LDL receptors, which are on the surface of hepatocytes of liver cells. And when they bind to LDL receptors, they mark them for degradation. So those receptors sitting on the surface are marked for degradation, and they go towards lysosomes, which ultimately leads to less LDL receptor being available on the surface of hepatic cells. And if there's less LDL receptor on the surface of hepatic cells, there's less clearance of LDL cholesterol from the circulation. And so the notion with PCSK9 inhibitors is to inhibit that process, is to have less LDL receptor marked for degradation such that there's more on the cell surface and greater clearance of LDL cholesterol.
That's great. I mean, I think the PCSK9 story is one of the most elegant scientific discoveries that really went from patients who were discovered to have this to the lab to identify how to block this, inhibit this, and then get it back as a drug into patients. So really sort of bedside to bench and back to bedside. It's an amazing example of how that development has really changed lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already seen, PCSK9 inhibitors as a class change lives. And so maybe you can put in context what we know already from other PCSK9 inhibitors, what PCSK9 inhibitors are out there. How does enlicitide, an oral PCSK9 inhibitor, fit in with the sort of armamentarium or the existing armamentarium of PCSK9 inhibitors?
For sure. I mean, this class of drugs is well known, certainly to cardiologists, lipid specialists, because there are 3 approved drugs that inhibit PCSK9 inhibitors, 2 that are monoclonal antibody-based injections, and 1 that's a small interfering RNA. So I think what's exciting about enlicitide is it's the first oral PCSK9 inhibitor to reach this phase of clinical development. And it's been an important development because we really do feel that having an oral PCSK9 inhibitor will provide therapeutic options that many patients have not wanted to do because of injections. And it just gives us another tool in our toolbox of cardiovascular risk reduction to lower LDL. And it is different than many other drugs. It's a macrocyclic peptide, which has been designed so that it can be given orally and still have effect. And it has been now tested in a variety of clinical studies for LDL lowering and shows that it reduces LDL by about 60%, which is on par with the antibody injectable medications. So I think there's a lot of promise for it. Everybody's very excited about it. And one question that always comes up is, are there side effects? What do we know about that? And maybe tell us a little bit on that side.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that the early efficacy data look very good for LDL cholesterol reduction. And I'd say that what we know so far about safety appears very good. As new compounds in this space are developed, one of the first thing is to demonstrate that there's an effect on LDL cholesterol. And in those studies, what we've seen is that there's been no excess risk of any adverse events in patients who've received enlicitide, no concerning trends, either with respect to sort of clinical adverse events or any of the laboratory values that we monitor closely. And in particular, when we're talking about new oral compounds, there's always a question of GI intolerance and gastrointestinal intolerance. And so what we've learned so far is that there was no excess risk in GI-related side effects in patients who were randomized to receive enlicitide as compared to placebo. So that's a very good, reassuring piece of the safety profile so far. And of course, a huge part of cardiovascular outcomes trial is really studying the effect on efficacy outcomes, clinical outcomes, but also safety outcomes. So I think we're going to learn a lot more in the CORALreef Outcomes trial about both efficacy and safety.
Great. Well, thanks so much. That's been a great update, and hope everybody has a little bit better understanding of the CORALreef Outcomes study.